Ladies and gentlemen, today I have the pleasure to welcome again Mr. Ruslan, a lawyer from Russia. Mr. Ruslan, thank you very much for joining me under the Human Rights Tree.
Thank you for inviting. Hi, everybody.
If I recall last time, you joined me under the Human Rights Tree. We talked about the Russian legal system. Today, I would like to talk about the Russian war. And for that, I would like to kind of understand what is the legal distinction between a special operation and a declaration of war in the Russian context.
You mentioned two different terms, but I would like to put a third one. So in Russian context, I think we can talk about declaration of war or martial law, about counter-terrorist operation, counter-terrorist offense. This is the term that exists in Russian law. And special military operation, this term used by current Russian government, current Russian propaganda, frankly speaking, it couldn't be found anywhere in Russian law or any other decrees, president's decrees or decrees of different bodies of Russian authorities before it all started. So you can say that this term, special military operation, was invented specifically for the invasion to Ukraine. So they wouldn't call it war. But it's not a legal term, it's just a term Putin called this whole war, this whole invasion, and then other media, other representatives of government authorities, they have to call it. And if you call it a war, you can be punished criminally. It can lead to criminal consequences. But just for your understanding that the term I mentioned slightly before, the counter-terrorist offensive, this is the term that can be applicable to Second Chechen War that started in 1999. And for example, this regime of counter-terrorist offense was imposed on North Caucasus region in Russia, and it lasted for 10 years. And with this kind of regime in this certain region, it's like an excuse to put more military there, to put checkpoints between the cities on the roads, and some other measures for law enforcement officers. Frankly speaking, to make their life easier, to give them more authority, to check people, to put sanctions on different people and use different law enforcement measures. But special military operation, that's not really a legal term.
Okay, but let's make assumptions. Why you think the Russian government chose that word instead saying we are declaring war on Ukraine?
Because in modern Russia, there is Vladimir Putin made a cult around the day of May 9th. That's a victory day in Russia and in all former USSR countries. That's the day the Nazi Germany was defeated by USSR. They surrendered. So for a long time, for a lot of generations, war has been a really terrible word. The first and main association, the idea that comes to a person's mind who grew up in Russia and other neighboring countries, when this person hears the word war, it's like a Nazi invasion to a country, all the wartime crimes committed by German army and SS officers. And for a long time, the Soviet propaganda in 50s, 60s, 70s, the main idea of Soviet propaganda was to impose peace. So war, such a huge war as World War II, would never happen again. So after decades of propaganda, putting the idea of peace in the whole world, and Putin using these ideas and nostalgia for Soviet Union, calling like one of his, as he thinks, greatest ideas, call it a war, it would be like a really bad idea for an official narrative, I think.
But in case the president of Russia decide to declare a war, what is the process? Does he?
He only needs to sign a decree. As far as I understand, I have to mention again, I'm not a specialist in constitutional law. So before our call, I just checked the latest legislation. As far as I understand, a president has to sign and adopt a decree. So it's not like really a law, because in Russian structure, legal structure, there is like a laws. There are like constitution, federal constitutional laws, then you have just federal laws, and then you have decrees of different bodies, decrees of the government, decrees of the president. So like in a perfect scenario, they should not contradict the federal laws or federal constitutional laws, but in modern Russia it happens. And for that, they sometimes use a slightly different language. And also it has to be mentioned that declaration of war leads to a lot of legal consequences, not only for the military, for the people living in the certain region where the martial law is declared, but also for a lot of civil transactions, for businesses, for insurances. So the declaration of war, even in certain regions, it can be like established martial law in certain regions of Russia. It leads to too many consequences. And in recent years, it was quite obvious that Russian government really doesn't want to deal with consequences, like serious consequences. For example, during the coronavirus, they haven't like established a certain regime of when such a huge thing like pandemic happens. Legally, it should have been established, but Russian government decided not to do that because they didn't want to deal with consequences of giving a lot of money from the country's budget to regular people. So they imposed a lot of restrictions, but at the same time, they decided not to support the people. And here I think that's the same. They just prefer not to deal with the consequences they don't want to like spend money on.
So in case of declaration of war, the president doesn't have to go through the Duma and the General Federal Assembly?
As far as I understand, no. As we have discussed during our previous call, for using the Russian armed forces abroad, it's necessary. But to declare a war or to declare a martial law in certain Russian regions, he just needs to sign a decree. And there are 4 Ukrainian regions that were like occupied by Russian forces, and they declared them parts of Russia on September 30th of 2022. And in October, as far as I remember, they declared martial law in those regions. Okay. So yeah, so special measures by Russian military, Russian special forces, FSB, they're imposed in those occupied Ukrainian regions, but in no like really Russian region, internationally recognized Russian region, the martial law was declared.
So as you know, on February 24th, 2022, there was Russian invasion in Ukraine. Do you recall where were you?
Yeah, I remember when I woke up in the morning to commute to my work. In the city center of Moscow from the outskirts. Some of my friends, they already woke up before me, and I looked through our chat in Telegram Messenger, and I've seen that some of my friends already started commenting on news they have seen before I woke up. So I found out almost instantly after I woke up. I was like really surprised. It's probably because English is my second language. I cannot express all my feelings like with words, what I felt, but it was not just surprise, but so many emotions. What's gonna happen with us, with my family, with my friends, with my country, with people I know? What's happening with Ukrainian people at this moment? Because I instantly saw at least several videos of different cities being bombed during the night. So we were scared that me and some of my friends that Putin would succeed. A lot of like people would die. A lot of like political repressions would start in Ukraine. The sanctions will put Russia into a stone age. That's why when I commuted to the city center, I already saw like tons of like a lot of lines to banks. People were trying to withdraw as much money as they could from ATM machines. So I went to work. I had a work day. It was Thursday, as far as I remember. But it was really hard to work that day, and I think nobody did because me and my colleagues, we were constantly checking the news for the whole day.
I see. So we know when the war happened, there was protest. You have people who made a manifestation on the support of the war, and
Yeah.
in the same time, other people protested against the war. Which side did you join?
Of course, against the war, like all my friends, my family members, I personally were all against the war because it's like horrible. But frankly speaking, I cannot remember whether like really demonstrations or manifestations of war supporters happened, because usually in Moscow, where I lived, all the demonstrations or huge rallies happened like from the oppositional side against the Russian government and their decisions. And as far as I remember, on that day in the evening, a huge rally against the war happened on Tverskaya Square in the city center of Moscow. It was less people than I expected, frankly speaking, but I can understand why that happened, because 1 year before that, in January of 2021, a lot of people went out for Alexei Navalny, the poisoned Russian opposition leader who came back to Russia after he restored his health. And a huge wave of political repressions happened in 2021. And that's why probably a lot of people were already scared by the time of February 2022. That's why the protest wasn't as huge as I expected.
So you went to join the protesters. Did you
I tried.
join or into the organization of the protest, or you just were fed up and you decided you will go and protest?
Yes, the second one, because all the huge rallies in Moscow, they at least they start from this square if it's not blocked by the police officers already. So people in these cases, they know that they have to go to this square, to Tverskaya Square, and people started to go there. But already a lot of policemen was already deployed there as well, and their paddy wagons for putting the detained people were already parked there, because like with each year there were more and more policemen in the Moscow downtown and city center, and more paddy wagons parked there to put detained people, not just on the days of planned rallies and demonstrations, but on a daily basis for now.
So can you take us to that journey? Going to work, did you go to work, or you decide just you want to go join the protest?
No, I did go. I did go to work. It was in the morning, and the protest was planned on the evening, on around 6, 7 p.m. People started to go there from all around the city. I went through that neighborhood as well, but I wasn't able to shout anything or join a huge group of people because I was already detained at that moment. So
Detained
yeah,
by
yeah,
the
yeah.
police? By the
By
police?
by two policemen. Yeah, by two policemen. I was wearing a
Mask.
medical mask. I had a hood on my head because like there is a really developed surveillance system in Moscow, and that's why when you visit the protest rallies, sometimes you can try to cover your face so they couldn't trace you back using the cameras. But sometimes this kind of camouflage, you can you can call it, it can lure the police right to you. I mean, during the rally. So probably I draw their attention with that, and they detained me and put me into the wagon where other 19 people were already placed.
But you know, often in protest situation, sometimes you have two groups, but in
Mm-hmm.
certain occasion you have three groups.
Mm-hmm.
The two groups I'm referring to is the police and the protesters. And the second situation is pro-Russians and pro-Russians, the police and the protesters. Which situation was it? Was it only the two
The
groups?
first one,
The
I
first?
haven't seen any supporters of war during
Okay,
that evening in the city center. Maybe
okay,
some separate people, but it wasn't an organized movement of war supporters.
okay.
Only like oppositional people, anti-war protesters. Yeah.
So can you take us to the ordeal? You went getting ready to protest for
Mm-hmm.
peace in
Mm-hmm.
Ukraine, and they arrest you. What happened?
Yeah, so they a usual procedure. They put a person into a wagon. Usually they put like up to 20 people in there, legally up to 20. Sometimes they put even more
Okay,
until there is like,
so
and then
they
Mhm.
took you into a wagon.
Yeah, and then when it's full, like 20 people or more, they just drive you to any police department around the city, which can like process you. So to interrogate some people, to write you an administrative protocol, so you are fined or you are detained for the whole night or something like that. So they would just drive people to different police departments around the city from the
So,
city center.
so you were driven to a police station.
Yeah, yeah, to southeast of Moscow, to really far away. It was like probably, yeah, yeah, outskirts of the city. And the policemen at the station, they were surprised somebody really made it to their station that evening.
I see. How many hours you spend in the police station?
Uh, for 1 hour, they were driving us because it was evening
Oh,
of a work day, and yeah, because of the Moscow's traffic, it took more than an hour to reach the police station, and we spent there. I was the first one to get out, but I spent there 5 more hours.
okay. What was the interaction
Uh,
between you
not
and
not really nice at all.
uh,
I
what
have to
was
say.
what was the language? What was the
Uh,
uh,
fr Frankly speaking, all the men, the policemen, the male policemen at the station, they were just like, they looked too tired. They just didn't care. They just wanted to do it as quickly as possible and finish their work day. The female workers, police officers, they were more energized, you can tell, and they weren't nice at all. They were like mocking people brought there. I was mocked for my Muslim last name because my father is from an ethnic minority, from Muslim ethnic minority from South Russia. I was mocked for that from women who worked there. But I had an attorney, like since I graduated from a law school, I had a lot of friends practicing attorneys, and I contacted one of them while I was driven to the police station, and he came there as well. And for 2 hours, he was trying to get into the police station, so he could start representing me. And I was
so
just waiting for them to allow him in.
so if I understand, because you are protesting for against the war, you were subjected to some kind of abuse and discrimination based on
As
on
well.
no, like is you are not by referring to your religion and group minority, is it or was it a way to say that you are not a real Russian?
Uh, Not really, but it's just a common thing in modern Russia. A lot of not not for everybody, but a lot of Slavic people, they treat minorities like from North Caucasus region, Muslim minorities, or Asian minorities from Russian far east. They treat them not as equals, I would say, because like 20% of Russian population are different minorities. Some of them are Slavic minorities like Belarusians, Ukrainians, but mostly Muslim and Buddhist minorities. So for them, it's quite hard to rent apartment in big cities like Moscow and St. Petersburg. Their names, they sound different, not like Slavic. And a lot of people even struggle pronouncing them. And that's also another basis for mocking people. And yeah, for a lot of different small reasons that are making them like different from the Russian you can imagine, because when people hear a Russian, they are imagining a Slavic person, probably with a beard, maybe blonde, maybe with dark hair, but still a Slavic person.
I see. So you were arrested. You spent 4 hours. What did you do to be released?
I was waiting for my attorney. Then I was told that I would be the last person to be processed because I called an attorney. All other they collected the data of people, like the names and registered address, because like in Russia there is a stamp in your passport, in your internal passport. Russian citizens have two passports, like for travel and internal, like an ID, but it has a lot of pages, and each person has a stamp with a registered address in your passport. So they collected your residential address, your name, and you just had to wait, because other people, one by one, they started going to the third floor of police station where FSB agents were interrogating them. And
Okay.
I was the last one. My attorney entered the station. He started representing me in this case. It was an administrative case, yet to be precise, because in Russia not all the offenses are criminal. It was administrative case because detention at the rally, it's administrative, as well as like some traffic violation or drinking in public places. That's all like an area administrative law in Russia. Uh, so he started representing me, and I was, I think, the only person who was not interrogated by FSB agents. I was processed by some regular police officer.
So did you pay a fee to be released, or just
I had to pay it later. I was fined. They scheduled a court hearing. I I attended the court hearing, yeah, but the judge didn't care because they usually use templates of court decrees for this kind of cases. They're all the same. They're using the same wording of the documents. So yeah, they just fined me like 20,000 rubles. It's like $300 right now, but for Russia, it's a big deal.
I see. So during the war in Russia, did you have the presentiment that this will take long?
Frankly speaking, at the beginning, we thought it would take maybe several weeks, but after like day 3 or day 4, at least I caught a feeling that it will take much longer because Ukrainian army did not surrender. Ukrainian army did not allow Russian occupiers to take any major city. Mostly because Russian army for the whole beginning of invasion, they were able to take only one regional center, like the capital of the region in South Ukraine, the city of Kherson, which they lost in November later that year. So all the big cities, they stood against the occupiers. So we thought it would take much more time. But last May, I think, when I discussed the war and recent news with a lot of my friends at our classmates meeting, we thought it would take maybe one more year. And now, 1 year later, I think it would take maybe at least 2 more years. at least. But it's really hard to tell what's going to be the end of the war.
So it was quite a surprise that the war take long for many Russians. And
Yep.
what was the view when it come to the media? I know there was social media, there is the regular media. Did you have in the media decent voices saying that this war was not a good idea?
It depends where are you looking at, because like Russian TV, all the channels are governmentally controlled. So a lot of people who prefer not to consume Russian propaganda, they just don't watch Russian TV. Because all the oppositional media in Russia, all the best journalists, they already transferred to YouTube. And because at the beginning of the war, after a few days, the war singer started. Like they started to restrict access to websites of different journalists and media groups, like oppositional, of course. They started to persecute the journalists who kept streaming from Russia or kept posting news from Russia. So all the oppositional news that were trying to provide like a real image of the war, they had to leave the country. And for now, using YouTube, mostly YouTube, and Telegram Messenger, which is like for in Russian speaking world, is a really great platform to not only to contact your friends, but to circulate the news in different like Telegram news channels. Also oppositional, of course. So all the Russian oppositional news you can consume only from journalists residing abroad from Russia. But they still can receive information from Russia, so it's not affecting the quality of their news.
So basically, what are the tools you have to know about the reality of the war when it comes to casualties, people killed or wounded? Can you rely on the national media, or you are trying to have different sources of information?
On official Russian media, you cannot rely, like never, because the only numbers that are provided on Russian TV and Russian official media are from the Ministry of Defense. And they, for the whole war, I think they updated the numbers only 2 or 3 times. And if you're saying that the numbers are different, that's already a violation of law. You can be persecuted. So I and personally some other people I know, we prefer to rely on the number of casualties posted by American media. And I suppose American media, or British media, they take information from American Ministry of Defense or British Ministry of Defense, because Ukrainian numbers from Ukrainian media, they're really high, like sometimes too high to be for your understanding. And Russian numbers are just not true because they are too low. So I think truth is somewhere in the middle, but probably, yeah, the American numbers and British numbers probably are the best ones you can rely on.
Okay. But when you come to the war in Ukraine, there are voices, of course, that condemn Russia for attacking Ukraine. But we should acknowledge also there are voices out there that said Russia did what they did because they see NATO in their backyard. How the Russian population view that idea?
You just have to understand that a lot of people are just repeating stuff they hear on TV because they think that's like a credible source. But Russian TV, they can change the whole picture, the whole image each month, each week. It's depending on what the government wants to achieve. Because at the beginning of the war, the main goal was like to denazify Ukraine. demilitarize Ukraine. But after a few months, when Ukraine received so many like huge numbers of Western military tech, of like planes, of tanks later. But so they try not to speak about demilitarization anymore, because of course everybody understands that that wasn't achieved. And that is how like Russian media, official media, they put those ideas at the beginning, and they were putting this idea that NATO is approaching. Like it was you could have heard it from like every TV channel. But after Finland and Sweden were allowed into the NATO, they started not to mention this idea so broadly and so widely as before, because they, of course, they failed. They failed. The whole idea was like to put NATO away from the borders, but for some reasons, their actions led to the border with NATO being twice as long for now. So that's just how they were putting their goals for Ukraine, like to put the NATO away, denazify, demilitarize, as I have already mentioned. But they had to change the ideas, and they are constantly changing those ideas of this war, maybe like each month. But you have to understand that like official Russian narrative of Russian government and Russian media, they are just for people to have an excuse to, and so they can feel more like confident about that war. But those excuses don't have like real basis, as I think.
So we know after the during the war, sanction was taken to against Russia. How effective was the sanction?
Most of the sanctions, I believe, they have to last for years to have like a huge impact. A lot of sanctions war could have been better, especially if the European Union stopped buying oil from Putin's government instantly, because the like the biggest income from selling Russian oil Putin ever had was in March and April of 2022, if I recall it correct. So, and sanctions, they can put Russian economy in distress, but I'm pretty sure Vladimir Putin is such a person who would like fund war for the longest time. It's like a Russian joke when a father comes home and he is saying to his family that my salary got smaller, and the son is asking, "Wow, Daddy, does it mean that you are going to drink less?" "No, son, it means you are going to eat less." So this is kind of logic I think it will lead to. So they won't defund the war. They will probably defund, and are already doing this with all other spheres, all other areas of people's life in Russia, like education, medicine, and all other. So I think sanctions could have been better, but still they are. I rather think they are working and will work than not. Yeah.
Yet, when you come to the war, many people like you admitted, was thinking that the war will go faster, that Ukraine will give up and Russia will occupy. But this has not been the case. And the war did in many ways show certain weakness in the Russian military. Did you have that assumption that things will go bad the way they went?
Me and my friends, we had an assumption, but we could never imagine that corruption in the Russian Ministry of Defense and in Russian army was so huge that a lot of people, a lot of tanks, a lot of like ammunition, all the stuff that could have seen, you could have seen on paper, like in numbers, they weren't even real, and that a lot of money were stolen. So the corruption we all knew that it was corrupted, like the system was corrupted, but to such an extent, it was like unimaginable. So for me, that was like a surprise, frankly speaking. Yeah.
With that, I think the Russian government even have to rely on a group called Wagner. Did
Yeah.
you know Wagner before, or you?
I think you mean like vata, vatniki. Yeah, this is a slang term to call people supporting Putin, supporting war. Yeah, this is a regular slang term for all the Putin supporters. So I know this term, yeah. And I've seen such people, but I don't have close friends or relatives supporting Putin. So I'm not really close with such people.
Yeah, but I'm referring to Wagner, the mercenary group.
Wagner, understood.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah.
Is it well-known group in Russia, or is come to predominance during the war?
Nowadays, during the war, of course, it became popular. But before that, for the people who already read a lot of news, and I as well, I tried to read news like every day. So a lot of people already heard about them from Syrian war, from Russian presence in Syria, because the Wagner group, they participated in a lot of military actions against different Syrian cities. They tortured people there, they killed people, and not only in Syria, but in Central Africa as well. Because there are a lot of like news, a lot of cases where they participated in assassinations of journalists, of people trying of a lot of people. So they are like people to do dirty work, frankly speaking. So at least for the last 7 years, I've heard about them. Yeah.
So on a final take, what do you think? Where we heading with this war in your humble judgment?
It's really hard to tell when the end of war is going to happen and what would be the end, when the Ukrainian army can restore their borders, like dated 1991 with Crimea. But if the Putin's regime would be still there in Moscow, he would try to do everything like to keep the war going. He will bomb Ukrainian territories from Russian territory. So for me, like the end of war, like the real end, I can see only with the dismissal of Putin and with somebody else who is willing to finish this war taking over. I cannot imagine right now how it's going to happen and who's going to be his substitute, but I cannot believe the war can be ended while Putin is still the president of Russia. So yeah, somebody have to do something with that. I cannot even imagine who it's gonna be, how to do it, but it should be done, I think.
Again, Mr. Ruslan, thank you very much for the opportunity you're giving us to learn more the insight on what was happening in Russia during the war. I know at certain point you decide to leave your family and your country behind and go to exile. I hope we will have the opportunity one day to talk about that journey.
Of course. Thank you.
And again, thank you very much.
Thank you. Take care. Have a nice day.